How's it going? Welcome to the channel. Welcome to the podcast. If this is your first time as a listener, thank you for joining us. If you're a reoccurring listener, thank you for joining us once again. If the subject and the contents of coaching, leadership, and team is something that you're passionate about and resonates with you, think this channel is a great fit, think this podcast is a great fit. Give us a like. Give us a subscribe. Have a great day. How's it going? This is Keanu Yamamoto with the Coachers Podcast, sitting here with Coach Steve Thorpe, head wrestling coach for Sweet Home High School in Oregon. Coach, thanks for jumping on. Please tell us about your family, journey, background, all that good stuff.
Like I said, I'm Steve Thorpe. I was born and raised in Sweet Home. I graduated from here in 1986, and that was, I like to say 86. That was the greatest graduating class of all schools. So, but I went off to college. One of the first in my family, on both sides of my family. I went to Pacific University for 1 year, and I wrestled for Mike Clock there. And then I transferred from there to Oregon State, where I wrestled the 88, 89, and 90 seasons. And then I graduated in 91 from Oregon State. I came back to Sweet Home, married my wife, Heather, and we started our life back here. I coached and taught, and I've been coaching and teaching now. This is going to start my 36th year. It'll be my 31st year as the head coach. 5 years I was an assistant. During that time, we've had 3 kids. I have a daughter, Taylor, and daughter, Natalie, and a son, Travis. Taylor's and her husband, Chad, have 2 kids, Lainey and Baylor, and Natalie and her husband, Bob, have 2 boys, Wakes and Gatlin, and Travis married, I think it's going to be, in September, it'll be their 1-year anniversary, married Aaliyah. So, but I'm here, I'm actually in my classroom is where I'm doing this from. So
that's awesome, Coach. Kind of talk about, did you always know that you wanted to be a coach? Can you talk about your transition and becoming the head coach at Sweet Home?
No, I didn't. I wasn't. I was going to college because I still wanted to wrestle and cut timber, and there's no degree for cutting timber and logging in college, but I figured I'd go to college and wrestle, and I'd get a business degree. So one day when I'd own my own company is how my mind was set. And because I'm from a logging community and a timber, industry. Then after finding out those business classes, I didn't like them. I went into education at the semester. I changed into education and, still planning the wrestling end of things. Transferred to Oregon State my sophomore year. I'm the varsity guy. I'm wrestling. I'm doing fine. And I got dumped on my head, and I had a spinal injury, a neck injury that lasted about 6 to 8 weeks. And I always say that was my Lord and Savior that dumped me on my head to snap me out of my way of thinking. And from that point on, I was all about the getting my degree, and I knew I wanted to come back. I didn't want to go anywhere other than Sweet Home. I wanted to come back to Sweet Home. That was always my plan, and I wanted to coach. And I coming back here, getting my degree and coming back here was the plan. It wasn't that coming back was always the plan. It just wasn't coming back and being in a classroom,
Gotcha. What are you teaching out there?
I teach math. I teach special needs math. We call it unified math. I have a background in adaptive physical activities for kids with special needs. And I have a math minor. I'm a K through 12 PE specialist with a math minor, and I've been teaching math for over 30 years. I've always sprinkled in a little bit of PE, but for the last several years, it's just been math. And so it's Algebra 1, and I teach financial algebra for juniors and seniors, and math for the trades for juniors and seniors.
That's awesome, Coach. 36 years in total, 31 years as the head coach.
Yeah, this will be 31.
This will be 31. At what point did you feel like you had it figured out as a coach?
I don't have it figured out now. I still don't have it figured out. The minute you think you've got it figured out, then there's no reason to get better at it. It's, and I know I don't have it figured out. So I'm still constantly learning. And that's where my friendship with Neil Russo and Steve Landry, Mike Simons, and different people, JD Alley, and different people in the coaching arena, Jason Lovell I talk to, and bounce stuff off, because I don't have it all figured out. At the beginning, I thought it was going to be about winning duels and winning matches and doing all that. But I had a very good, my head coach his name was Norm Davis. And then I coached under Norm. He's a Oregon Hall of Fame coach. great man. But I can tell you the turning point for me was as an assistant coach. I was telling that old man we needed to kick a kid off the team because he wasn't going to help us out, wasn't ever going to do, win us duels or anything like that. And he put his finger in my face and he said, "You need to remember, this is more than just about making wrestlers. This is about making young men." And so, you know what I said? I said, "Yes, sir." And if when I'm all the way done, if people just say I was a really good coach, then I didn't do what I set out to do. I want them to, I hope they understand that I was building more than wrestlers.
Yeah, that's good stuff, Coach. So just looking on the internet a little bit, right? Eight state team championships. I couldn't count how many individual state champions you had on. How many I saw online, and they stopped counting it in 2021. You had over 600 wins as a coach, and that was back in 2021. So with all those feats, right? What are you most proud of as a coach, as a person?
Man, I'm proud of our success. I'm very proud that the expectation that we've set for our young men and our young women in the wrestling arena. I'm very proud of that. I'm proud of what we're doing, and I'm proud of our numbers. I take a lot of pride in the fact that those kids that finish, they get me forever. They finish with me in the program, they get me forever. And I take a lot of pride in watching these young men and young women become moms and dads and good society people and go off to college. I'm winning state titles. That's pretty darn cool. I'm very proud of what I've done there and the trophies, that we've won. And probably if you would ask me this when I was in my 20s or 30s, it'd be a different answer. I'm 58, and I take most pride in how kids compete and how they find success. And not everybody's going to be a state champion, but I take a lot of pride in the people that I'm building and the citizens that I'm making.
Yeah, I love that, Coach. What's the why behind coaching? And I think you kind of touched on it right there, but if you could dive into that a little bit more.
A lot of people, a lot of people, I want to teach and I want to coach, and until they have to teach and they have to coach. And a lot of people want to teach the smart kids and coach only the good kids. You see it in football. These guys, I want to help with football, but they only want to help on Friday night. And for me, the why has to be that it's not a want. It becomes almost an addiction that you strive to touch, to be in that competitive mode and to see this build and see this clay, and you get to mold it. And I think that's the why behind it. I think also my why has to include that my wife has always been with me on this. She's she's the grounding of us, and make sure that when I do, because wrestling's not the number one thing in my life. I would hate for somebody to think that. It's down a few, my family, my faith, and I love to hunt and fish, but the why has to be that I've developed that loving to mold people, and it's just fun. That competitive, that going out there, that it's just something about it. And
Yeah.
it's I've been very fortunate to work in a school that supports what I do. Wrestling's a big thing here.
Yeah. Can you kind of just touch on that a little bit? When I think of wrestling and I think of my high school buddies who wrestled, they're coming out of practice and they're freaking drenched in sweat and like, okay, that's freaking hard. So how do you go about, sustaining so much success, keeping it fun, but finding that balance where it's just challenging enough for them so that they're always consistently growing, but not too hard where they're going to lose passion for the sport and step away?
Well, one thing is I've always maintained my expectations. I used to lie to kids and tell them, "Oh, it's not going to be too hard. It's anybody can do it." And that's just a lie. It's going to be hard. It's going to suck sometimes. It's going to be, if you want to win, if you want to be successful, if you don't want to be humiliated, then you have to be willing to do the things others won't. And it's going to be very hard every single day. But you see, one of the things is I'm not just coaching high school. I've been coaching MAC Club for over 30 years. I coach the MAC Club too. And we've grown to a point where, but these kids, like last year's state title team, what did I had nine seniors, and 8 of the 9 seniors I had coached when they were 5 years old. They were my kids. And, we're building in-house. And so, you gotta I need to plan every day. Every day is a plan. This is what we're going to do. That's how I maintain. There's a plan of what we're going to do, and you can't always grind. You got to have fun. We do have fun, but I don't always tell kids what they want to hear, but they'll always get what they need to hear. And so we work very, very hard, but we go into it and they know that. And that's what we've done with our women's too, as we've done that. We've told them, you're going to be side by the boy, you're going to work very, very hard. But you also, one of the things how I've maintained that too is I've got great assistant coaches. We've got a process and a program here. We're not a team. I mean, I've got great assistant coaches. I've got great parents that are involved, and we're doing this together. And it's not just me; it's an us thing.
That's awesome, Coach. One of the things that just kind of popped in my head as we were talking, because I think it came up when I was talking to Coach Neil Russo, and we kind of touched on it just beforehand before we were talking, like, what are some of the common denominators of, the top coaches in Oregon? We were talking about you and your three really close friends or best friends, Coach Simons, Coach Russo's, and Coach Landers, that you guys all attended Oregon State together. But I don't know about Coach Landers, but I know for the other two, Coach Simons and Coach Russo and yourself, all you guys are within the building at the school.
Yeah,
and I think that makes a huge difference. And you look at some of the other sports, around the state, like Dave Turnbull, track coach at Summit, arguably one of the top track coaches. Like, he's in the building as well. Like, I think that makes a huge difference.
If a kid needs something, he can come right to me in the classroom. He can walk down the hall. If a kid's messing up in a class, I will walk down into their class. I will ask to talk to them. That having that connection to where you don't have to show up to practice and the first 15 minutes of your practice is dealing with the things that had happened that day. That's like a parent coming home from work and the other parent saying, hey, Johnny did this and this and this. Now discipline him, and they just walked in. And so for us, being in the building has a huge, huge benefit. And something I don't know if Neil told you, Neil is a Newburgh alumni. Steve Lander is a Roseburg alumni. I'm a Sweet Home alumni. J.D. Alley is a Culver alumni. Mike, he's from South Albany, and he's the only one that's not coaching at his alma mater. So,
yeah, that's crazy.
Being in school is huge. Being an educator, knowing how to communicate with parents and kids, it's a very beneficial. And that's why it's so important, especially in a profession like education where there's a shortage of teachers. We're going out there and finding those teachers that need to be connected, and I've got incredible administration where I'm at here in Sweet Home. So, they're looking, what can you do other than just teach? Can you run a club? Can you coach? Can you volunteer? And that's how you got to be successful.
That's good stuff, Coach. If I were to ask you, your coaching philosophy, what's important to Coach Steve Thorpe? What's important to Sweet Home Wrestling? What would that be?
My philosophy is that we're better, and I actually write down and I give out to parents and kids my philosophy. But basically it's that, some kids that have the ability to be a state champion need to work to that ability, and there's some kids that just making a lineup is going to be their goal. My philosophy is that we need to hit every kid where they're at and get them to where they need to be. And whether that's a varsity wrestler, a state qualifier, a state champion, an All-American, that's what it is, because everybody's different. And, part of my philosophy also that I let them know is that I don't know if you realize it or not, but I place incredibly high expectations upon myself. And I'm going to work every day to meet those expectations. And at the same time, I put incredible expectations on my athletes. But I do the same in the classroom. I put expectations on kids in the classroom. One of the nice things about being 58 is you can still get away with some old school. You still get away with old school. You can still tell somebody what they need to hear. And you could care less if a keyboard warrior gets on the internet and it has their feelings hurt. My philosophy is that we're gonna set high expectations and we're gonna work hard every day to meet them. And whether, when you write your goals and we write goals, I don't want to just, I want to be this. You got to tell me how you're going to get there so I can help you get there.
Yeah. I like that, Coach. The word culture always gets thrown around, and the last coach that I was on, made a comment at the end that, he wanted to know how other programs, regardless of the sport, help to build that up, whether it be through team activities or just some sort of approach and practice. But when you hear the word culture, what does culture mean to you? Are you guys doing anything unique as a program to help build that up?
Well, I think our expectation, just our expectation. We've got a culture. We've got one. We've built one. And I continued from what there was, but we don't expect the janitors to pick up after us in the locker room. When we're done at a tournament or a duel, we clean the bleachers. Even the Bible says to humble yourself, have a servant's heart. And so, we have that culture of that we're going to work for everything. Everything we get needs to be earned. And there's some things we do, and I started, you can look up the Sweet Home Wrestling outside workout on YouTube. We made a little video of it, but I put together an outside workout, and it's kind of continued to be, it's taken on its own. And in that video, I explain it some, but you find out what kids are made of, that's for sure. But, and the culture, it's just when it's hard to say this is what we do when we've gotten to a point of this is who we are. And so, we just work very hard, and we're the first ones to go and be crazy at a basketball game. And we're the first one to go cheer on the girls at a basketball game and to go watch swimming, to go, it's, we're the most successful program in the history of Sweet Home Wrestling, or in the history of Sweet Home Athletics. But if you ask my kids that, they would just think they're just part of something special.
Yeah. That's good stuff. How many athletes do you guys carry, both boys and girls?
Hold on one second. I got the light turned off. We have
you got to move around again. Is it one of those motion sensors?
We started this year. What did we start with? 71 kids, boys and girls. We finished, I think, with 49 boys and 17 girls, I think, is what we finished the year with. So we always, our numbers are pretty good. I mean, we've middle school and Mat Club, we had 173 kids total this year in our
That's crazy.
Total. Yeah,
is that pulling from Lebanon and Albany area?
No.
Where are you pulling for the Mat Club?
Sweet Home.
Wow.
That's why I say my kids are my kids.
Crazy.
My kids are my kids.
Yeah.
The last few years, I stopped coaching 4 nights a week, and I only coach 2 nights a week. One of my assistant coaches, Tomas Rosa, he coaches the older group. He coaches them 2 and 3 nights a week. I coach the littles, so K through second grade. I have about 60 to 75 of them. I coach 2 nights a week, and then he coaches the others 70 to 80 kids, and then we have an optional Friday thing. And so, yeah, the wrestling,
that's awesome, man.
It's grown. It's been pretty successful.
Yeah. Obviously a wide spectrum of athletes that you get to coach. What would you say is the funnest age for you as a coach, where you feel like you can make the biggest impact as a coach?
Not junior high. Junior high is the toughest age to coach, because there's more than just body changes happening and coordination and everything. I love coaching them at high school. I've coached kids from 4-year-olds old through, but I do love the high school age and that extra work and watching guys go from average to good, or good to great, or great to extraordinary, and earning All-Americans. And I love the high school age, but I've hauled them around when they're 5 and 6 years old to Las Vegas and Utah and Pocatello, Idaho, and done all that too. And it was awesome getting to coach my son, through the process also. But I was coaching and doing this before there was a Steve Thorpe, and I'm still doing it after he's done competing.
Yeah. That's awesome, Coach. I had a conversation with a basketball coach, longtime basketball coach out of Barlow, a guy named Tom Johnson, and we were talking about just kind of youth sports. And I'd love to get your opinion on this topic. Is, when in your eyes, when is winning become relevant? Because I think, with youth sports, is my philosophy, you want them to have fun. You want them to learn as many sports as possible, get better from a technical standpoint in whatever sport you're playing. At what point does winning, start becoming relevant into the equation?
Well, it has to do with their readiness. My son was a 2-time All-American when he was 11. And when he was being recruited, no one asked him about that. No one asked him about being a state champion at schoolboy age. No one asked him about winning the puzzle pieces when he was 10. That wasn't important, but to him, it was important. To me, it was important also. That age of readiness, it isn't, there's not a set age, but these people that are making a 5 and 6 year olds and grinding them and doing that, they're fools. They're not doing anybody any good. They're not doing themselves any good. And I get to see the worst of parents. And I've been that parent before where I've lost it, on my 11-year-old, but I think when their readiness, when they know that when they're able to do the work to be better, then winning should become more important to them. And ultimately,
That's a great answer.
yeah, ultimately it's a high school, and I love it because I tell my Mac Club parents, my son was a triple crown. My son won a state title in freestyle and Greco when he was 9, and none of the college coaches asked him about it. So win now is not that important.
Yeah. That's a great answer there, Coach. Just not even to try and put an age on it, but just make it subjective on, where that athlete is. And just like you said, meeting them where they're at.
Yeah. Now in high school, the win needs to become important. You're at a point there where it needs to become important.
What would you say is the greatest challenge of coaching?
Coaching your own son, coaching your child, one of the greatest and hardest things I've ever done, but more great than it was.
Talk to me a little bit about that. Cause my daughter, probably not athletically motivated. I know my son is going to be. He's already pretty coordinated with the ball.
Every time my son would step on the mat, his dad was one of Oregon's top coaches. His dad was a wrestler for Oregon State, and it didn't matter if when he was 4 or 5, And then later on, here, you better have, he's getting put into different brackets when they're bracketing him. Oh, he needs to be in a tougher bracket by people because his dad's with USA Wrestling. And I had a friend tell me when he was wrestling his freshman year or his sophomore year at an open tournament of college, and a really close friend of mine said, I wonder what it would be like to live in his skin, getting his name called, and his dad is this for USA Wrestling, this for Oregon Wrestling, this for Sweet Home Wrestling, this, and I thought about that, and I thought, man, I'm just glad that his junior and senior year, I became better at coaching him, and I got to sit back and I got to watch how good he was, and I enjoyed that, and so that, and also one of the toughest things to do is that in today's society we're not just coaching kids, we're having to coach kids in different situations, and it's a constant battle. It's a constant battle with split parents, homelessness, technology addictions, drug. That's all part of it, and that's why it's more than just about making wrestlers.
Yeah. Oh, that's good stuff, Coach. Why is the sport of wrestling the greatest sport, in your opinion?
Well, it's the first one ever wrestled in Genesis. Jacob wrestled the angel, man. It's the one that used to settle battles. It's the greatest sport of all kind. People used to wrestle for land. They used to fight for land. So it's the greatest sport because it's the most historied sport. And it's the one that not only are you using your mind, but you've got to use your body, and you got to push yourself, people say 110%. No, you can get 100%. That's it. I'm a math guy. 100%. But you got to be able to do your 100% even when your body's clicking at 70, I just love what it does, how it makes you feel, what it builds it. And it's something that you will use the rest of your life, not a double leg, not a snap down. You will use discipline. You will use sacrifice. You will use that the rest of your life. That's what makes it the greatest sport.
I love that. Can you kind of talk to us just a little bit about in season, kind of your practice structure for the week, how you go about laying out the week, what that looks like?
Well, we practice twice a day. We come in the morning. We do, running as we get closer. As we start getting into the season, we get closer to competitions, do a lot of interval runnings where I'll have them sprint aside, jog, walk. Usually sometimes it's just always a Monday. It's going to be a long run, 20, 25 minutes. we're in the gym, or we come in and I'll bring out certain guys to drill technique. But our daily practice, and I always have a practice plan, and it's always posted so kids can see it and they can know. And it's always starts off with it's consistent. We have announcements, we have warm-ups, we drill very hard. Some days we won't wrestle at all on any technique, but we drill, and then we have live. Our live might be situational. Also, I have enough coaches and good enough. We'll split the room into threes and we'll go stations, 25 minutes at a station or 30 minutes at a station, and then rotate, and it's technique focused. But every day, it's going to be something that you got to push yourself. And even if it isn't at high intensity, you still got to push yourself on being disciplined to the technique. And that's something that we do pretty well. I don't believe in practicing these 2.5, 3 hours. You lose stuff. So my practices, earlier in the year, we're 2 hours. Later on, when we're cranking and we're drilling, we're an hour and a half. When we get down towards the end, we're an hour. And
yeah,
we believe in a strong taper.
What's a drill or a workout that you do now that you wish you did, earlier in your career?
Oh man, I wish I would have had Colby Covington. I had Colby come and do a thing that during COVID I had live stream going 3 nights a week in Oregon wrestling, and I reached out to Colby. Colby's a kid from Thurston, went to my camp here, and he said, "Drillers make killers." I wish we would have drilled more when I was in high school. I wish we would have drilled more when I was younger. But right now, our consistency on our feet, on score and score again, that's kind of a concept that we have. And then there's some technical things. There's some specific drills we do. I do a long shot drill. I do a relentless drill, but they'd mean nothing to anybody else unless they've been to my camps, unless they've been to my clinics, or unless they've been in the room. But the drill, we drill harder and more than we did when I was first coaching. And and
Gotcha.
Don't get me wrong, we drilled before, but we wrestled hard. But, one of the things is, I've been fortunate to 2 of my guys that were on my first 2 state championship teams, they're coaches for me now. Both of their sons were All-Americans this year. They were on my 98, 99 teams. And, and
That's crazy.
I've won state titles in the last 4 decades, in the 90s, 2000s, the 10s, and the 20s. And there isn't going to be.
That's a crazy statistic, by the way. That is a crazy statistic.
I honestly, and I'm not being boastful, but I don't know if
for 58. I mean, that's still freaking young, man.
Yeah, I don't know who else can say they did it in over 4 decades. They've won them in every decade. So
I mean, you got at least 30 more years in you. What do you think?
No,
so you can expand that out to 7 decades.
No, I already said I like fishing and I like hunting. So, and I like my grandbabies. Yeah. I'll be done, but not yet. Not yet.
Are we waiting for the grandkids to make it through high school, and then we'll wrap it up?
No, I actually coached my grandson Wakes last year. He was 4 years old. I coached him in Mat Club, but it isn't going to be me that has to haul them through Mat Club. Their dads can do that. I'm not riding off into that yet.
Gotcha. If I came and watched practice, or another coach came and watched practice, what do you want us to take away from that practice as far as just kind of the identity of the program?
That when you walked in the room, we go to work. That we don't talk about working hard. When you're in the room, you're working. One thing I don't do is spend 5-10 minutes showing technique and talking. It's quick. And that's the only way you're going to get good. You stand around, you lose interest. Wrestling has nothing to do with standing around. So we don't practice that in the room. We're in constant.
I got this. Sorry, go ahead, coach. I didn't mean to cut you off.
I said we're constantly going. We are constantly getting work done. They'd see that there's high energy. I am loud. My assistants are talking. We're always in somebody's ear.
Love that. When you were talking, I just thought of a one-liner that I got from another coach, because you're just kind of talking about that same thing. He said, a bad rep is better than a good stand.
Yes, it is.
And I was like, man, that's good. I'm freaking taking that one. I'm putting that in my back pocket next time I'm coaching again.
Yes.
I like that. Bad rep is better than a good stand. If you could coach any player, past or present, who would it be and why? Excuse me. If you could coach any wrestler, past or present, who would it be and why?
Any wrestler that I've already coached?
It could be someone that you've coached. It could be someone that it could be Habib. I don't know. It could be anyone you want. It's just a big hypothetical.
Oh man, I don't really think about that. The ones I've coached, I would love to have. I would love to put together an all-star team. I'd love to put together a team of some guys that I've coached in the past. I'd love to, some of them that I've had through each decade. And I don't know, man. I'll just say this. If I could coach anybody, it would have been my daughters, because they would have been tough wrestlers. They were incredible athletes, and that way I'm off the hook. I don't get in trouble by saying somebody. So I don't know.
No,
Hey,
that's good. That's good.
I
right
would
there.
have it if I could put an all-star team together. I have my Mount Rushmore of wrestlers in this program, but I can't keep it at 4 heads. It's 5.
I guess if you were to make an all-star team for every decade that you've coached, since you've won a state title in every decade, what would you say, without getting in trouble, what would you say would you pick the decade that would probably be the most dominant? If you had to make an all-star team from every decade.
My first 2 state title teams, 98, 99, they'll tell you they're the greatest wrestling team in Sweet Home history. They were good.
Okay.
And
we'll go with that then. We'll go with that.
But this team that I won it with last year, they were really, really good. So I would say the probably the 99, 98, 99, the 26, and the 17. The 2017, what makes that special is my son was a freshman on that team. He lost to a teammate in the finals, and that guy won his second state title, who is now one of our coaches. And we won the state title over Crook County by 0.5. So that's probably one of the coolest. That's one of the coolest ones. 98,
I couldn't even imagine.
Yeah.
I couldn't even imagine just the emotions with your boy wrestling, someone else on the team and still being, happy that for the other guy, but then still having the father hat on and take me through that emotion, I guess.
My son wrestled. My son was a 2-time state champion, and he wrestled. He got second as a freshman, fourth as a sophomore, and then he won it his junior and senior year. He lost to a teammate in the finals his freshman year, who was a senior, Kobe Olson, who's one of my coaches. Then he wrestled another teammate in the finals his junior year, who was a senior and a very good friend of his. And so the emotions I can't jump up and down. And I couldn't celebrate, because at the same time, the kid my son beat in the finals his junior year was a kid I coached since he was 5. And, I hated that they wrestled each other, but I was proud and so happy for my son. Now, when my son won it his senior year, then it all came together. That's when I got to celebrate. And he was a great wrestler and he had a good college career, but I'm more proud of he's become a good man. And that makes me very proud.
That's awesome, Coach. I gave you a little heads up before we got on. My daughter's question of the day was, what is your favorite monster?
Yeah. You asked me that one. Eddie Monster from the Addams Family.
I like it. What does the word team mean to you, Coach?
Well, with us in our program, and one thing, and I've on purpose, I haven't said team a lot. I say program. And we talk in Sweet Home about the Sweet Home wrestling family. And in Oregon, I talk about the wrestling community, the wrestling family. So for us, a team is an after the fact. What did this team accomplish? What did this team, do? But its program what it means to me is program, because what kids are learning at 5 and 6 years old is the technique we want them to learn later on. The kids in junior high who are being required to show up on time to practice are learning the same expectations they're going to have when they get to high school. And we're also doing that with the parents. It's a program. So what team means to me is it's the afterwards. It's the culmination at the banquet to what was the team accomplishments of the year. But what I like to change that to is program. And what the program means is that we're all in it together. We're a family, and we're all rowing the same boat.
I like that, Coach. How do you go about, addressing athletes, wrestlers who aren't meeting expectations or they're struggling with effort?
I hurt their feelings. They get told what they need to hear, not just me, but my assistant coaches. We let them know there's an expectation. Now, if you could ask my kids if I care about them and if I love them, they'd tell you I do. But they'd also tell you that if my best kid's not getting it done, not doing what they're supposed to do, they're going to get an earful. It's the same in parenting. And, I think I've gotten a lot nicer. I'm a nice person. I'm a kind man, but my teams in the 90s and early 2000s they tell you that these other guys are getting sugar coated. But the way I deal with them is I speak truth. I let them know, I don't just say what they're doing wrong, but I let them know what they need to be doing too. You can't just, you can't just tell them you're not doing this and leave it at that. You got to do the whole thing. You got to let them know and then what they need to be doing.
I like that.
Boys and girls.
From a leadership standpoint, from a captain's process standpoint, how do you go about, establishing a sense of shared leadership within the team? And if you got a captain process, what does that look like?
I don't have a captain process. Leaders step forward. Leaders lead, plain and simple. You can't just say our seniors are our leaders, because some of your seniors are dumb shits. And so you can't just but a leader leads. Leaders lead by example. You get people to lead by voice. And I have had teams, I've had teams in years where I had to be the leader because there wasn't a definite person out there doing it. But, now we're at a place where I can have coaches and I have kids and I can say, you go talk to this group, or, I need you to have your voice. And so, but I don't have a process. If I were to start assigning captains or something like that, it wouldn't work in the way I do things.
Yeah. If you could sit down with any coach, could be from any sport, who would that coach be? And what would be that one question you need to ask them?
Oh, I don't have to wonder who that would be. I do already. It's Mike Simons. It's Neil Russo. Those two guys I have talked more. We have bounced questions off of each other. I call them when I need to do something. And there's another coach, Jason Lovell, who wrestled for Cascade, was a state championship coach for Cascade, wrestled for Oregon State. He's younger than me. He was a 98 grad, but he's become one of my very dear friends. But I don't have to wonder I wish I could sit down with this guy. Man, my best friends in this world are some of the best coaches in the history of the sport. And so, and then my time with USA Wrestling, I'm in meetings with Bruce Bumgardner, I'm getting input from guys like that. And so it's just, oh man, it's awesome.
That is cool, Coach. If you're looking at your friend group, right, and you're looking at all the success that your friend group having, you mentioned, 50 state titles between the guys that we talked about earlier. What are some of those common denominators from a character trait standpoint that you see in yourself, that you see in your friends, that's prevalent through all of you guys?
The reason they're successful in life, the reason they're successful is because they're willing to work. They're willing to work. You can be a kid. I've had kids in my classroom that can't add and subtract, but they show up every day and they work. If you're willing to work and put the work in, you're going to be successful. I've had students that struggle to pass classes, but they show up every day and they work really hard. They're going to be successful. We're willing to put in the time. We're willing to work. We make sacrifices. And along with that, our families have to sacrifice too. But one of my best friends in this world is named Steve Schilling, and he's a successful businessman, owns Advanced Mechanical because he's willing to work. And, and then you surround yourself with like-minded people, Once you start doing that, then it's kind of a key to success. I know it's funny because my first state title in 1998, I was looking at the poster in the room and there were myself and two assistants. And then this last one we just won in 26, there was myself and 10 assistants, So you get like-minded people that are willing to put in that time and willing to work. You're going to have success. You're just going to have success.
Yeah. Kind of speaking about your assistants there, what are some of the qualities that you're looking for in an assistant coach? And what's maybe a deal breaker for you when you're talking about the assistant coach process?
Well, my assistants, I don't just let anybody in our room. I mean, they've got to be like-minded. They got to have the same values, same expectations that I have. They've got to be willing to have a voice too. And not, I have to be able to take someone challenging, and having input. I can't just think it's everything's my way. I've got to have people that are working with me trying to build to the same thing. And so my coaches, and I'm very fortunate. One of my assistant coaches, Tomas Rosa, he's been with me, I think, for 15 years. He graduated from Sweet Home. He was a state placer for me. Kobe Olson is an assistant coach. Clint Saminsky was on my, and Jeff Landtroop were on my 2 back-to-back state title teams in 98, 99. We just brought on Shane Shepard for 2 years now, who, came up. I took him to South Africa. He came and worked out at my camp. But he has the same like mind. And I don't just bring somebody in to have a body and give a stipend to. You've got to be willing to work. You got to be willing to sacrifice and put in the time that's needed to be successful. And so I am very fortunate, more so than a lot of other coaches. I have a group of assistant coaches that they could be head coaches somewhere, and they chose to be here, because they like what we do. I think if you were to ask one of my assistant coaches if they feel like they are valued, they would tell you they are 100% valued, and they have a voice and they have input.
I like that, Coach. If I were to go and ask, one of your wrestlers, or go and ask one of your, assistant coaches, if you could describe Coach Thorpe in 3 words, what do you think those words would be?
I think, well, this is 2 words: hardworking. That's 1. 3. How about 3 things? They'd
3
say
things. That works.
As hardworking, I think character and integrity.
I like that, Coach. That's good stuff right there. Aside from winning, what other metrics do you use to define success as a coach?
Well, I have to define it. Do I still like what I'm doing? That has to be defined there. That has to be in there somewhere. Am I meeting goals? I don't meet every goal I set. I fail, but am I still willing to, let's do what's next to get to those goals? I measure success. I've been fortunate. I've won 8 state titles, team titles, but I've been second 9 times, so I've failed 9 times. Now I don't know how many thirds and fourths I got off the top of my head, but I know that 9 times I wasn't first. I was right there, but not first. But some of those teams were pretty darn good. And so I couldn't measure every year a successful year only if we win a state title or a regional title or districts or whatever. So I think I kind of measured in, did we accomplish some things? Did we get growth from kids? Did we get better? And, and I think that's a great measurement. It's probably pretty, it's subjective, did we get better? But that's measured by us coaches. And, I definitely don't gauge a season's success on what our accomplishments were, because I've never had a losing season, but I've lost some duels I wish I would have won. I've won some tournaments we probably shouldn't have. But so I did we get better? And as long as I can say that, I think that's kind of a good measurement.
Yeah. If you had to give some advice to your younger self, or young aspiring coaches within the wrestling world, what would that advice be?
I probably would say my younger self is, I'm going to be a dad, and I'm going to be a husband, and I'm going to be a friend. I'm going to be a papa a lot longer than I'm going to be a coach. And so to make sure that I don't store up all my treasures in the wrestling arena, because my family's had to take second a lot of times, and you don't get those times back. And so there's some things that I wish I would have done a little different. I'm not going to say I regret it, because I don't want to have regret, but it's very important that a younger coach knows that, you got to make wrestling important, but it can't be the number one thing. And if I could tell my younger self something, I would have said delegate more. Other people want to be involved. They want to help. They have tools. They have things, but I didn't want to put people out, and I wanted to make sure it's done the right way. And so, that's something you could tell a lot of young coaches too, and enjoy it, enjoy it, because when I won my first state title in 98, and then we won it in 99, I had incredible kids, and they were awesome. And then they graduated. And then in 2001, we got second. And I got phone calls. What happened to you? What happened? And I'm like, we got second. we shouldn't have even trophied, but we got second. And people, the expectation is such a high thing. And so one thing I learned is learn how to celebrate and enjoy those trophies, celebrate the kids' accomplishments. Last year we won it by 90 points, 7 in the finals, but we only had one champion. And people was like, oh, what happened in the finals? Well, we put 7 in the finals. We won the state title. We could have had 4 more guys not go to the finals, and we still would have won the state title. So I've learned to celebrate. I would advise them to celebrate their successes and celebrate their kids.
Yeah,
so
that's good stuff, Coach. I mean, I've never been a recipient of that. I haven't coached any state titles, but why do you think that? Why do you think the expectation from the outside is any higher than what you guys' expectations would set for you guys selves? And like, why is it that they perceive second as losing when second is a freaking incredible feat?
Yeah. I guess it's because of the standard we'd set. There's teams that will be, have good seasons and then have a downtime, have a period where they don't have success. And there's all of that. I've never, we've never been bad in my time, in my time coming back. We were never bad, from the time I've been the head coach. And, so there's an expectation, when you're the boogeyman, people just expect you to always be scary. And we've gone in and we're always in the mix somewhere. So, we win a state title and then in 2007, we won the state title without a champion. And then in 2000, and then we won it again in 2009. And, in between those, we were second, but everybody's like, what happened? How could that? We were just second. Other people scored more points than we scored. That's how it happens. So, yeah. But I don't know. I don't know how many state trophies I've got as a head coach, but I know I can tell you about those 9 seconds though.
Yeah. This is, total hypothetical, just because in our conversation, I know the expectations, the standards that you hold, you're not going to allow this to happen, but total hypothetical. Did you ever think, and I'm speaking for myself here, do you ever visualize or you ever thought about the hypothetical situation of, okay, what happens if we did have a losing season? Like how you would react and respond as a coach, I guess, in that sense of adversity?
Well, I don't think about that. I don't think about having a losing season because I know the work I put in. When I came back to Sweet Home, when I left Sweet Home in 86, we were 3rd at the state tournament. And then when I came back to Sweet Home in the 91-92 season, we took 7th out of 9 teams at district, and we took 1 kid to state. And so there was some building that I started doing as an assistant and getting Mat Club and some things going. And then, in my 3rd year back, we were district champions. And then, we got a 4th place trophy. I was an assistant coach, but we got a 4th place trophy. And I never wanted to ever let things fall to where we would go down. So I've always thought about how to get better and put in the work. Now, if that were to happen, I would respond by going to work. I would just get to work. I was never a state champion. I was a 3-time state placer in high school. That was, in 3 divisions. And I never felt that I achieved what I could have. But I also worked, and I probably never should have been a varsity guy at Oregon State, but I just worked. That's what I knew. It's what I was raised to do. So, and if hypothetical, don't you dare put that on me. Hypothetically speaking, we won't ever.
It's not going to, it's not going to happen. And I'm just kind of speaking from, just personal experience. Just recently, I started just, competing at beach volleyball again. That's kind of been the love growing up. That's what my pop raised me as. But football was always the passion. So I played college football, small college football at Linfield. Yep. And then, I was been coaching college football for some years and stepped away and, getting back into competing. And it, it's kind of lit a fire in my butt. And, back to the days where I was, 7, 8 years old and I was superstitious where I would sleep with every ball that I had in the house. So I'd sleep with my volleyball, my basketball, my football, my baseball glove, my baseball. But I just remember those days, like lying in bed and then, not being able to fall asleep for like an hour, 2 hours, and just visualizing, all the good things that I can do. And then also visualizing failure, you know what I mean? And I guess where I'm coming around with this is, competing again, I think about the good things that can happen. And then I try and put myself in, bad situations mentally. Like, okay, if this happens, how do I combat myself out of this position? Which I'm sure you guys do, within wrestling, where you're practicing unideal positions. And how do you work yourself out of that? So from a mental standpoint and a mental approach, I'm just very curious about that. Is like when you're preaching visualization, or when you're preaching, teaching progressions, I'm sure you're putting them in adverse situations so they know what that feels like, what that strain is, what that pressure is, so they can work out of that.
I absolutely love this question, because one of the things I tell my kids is, as we're going through and in practice, I said, you want to be that guy. And I said, and as a little boy, I was that guy that had the bases loaded and 2 strikes, and I hit the double that scored the winning run. And I said, and I made the diving catch that won the game. And I said, you want to be that guy in that situation. And so I tell them, put yourself there where you're the guy. But then something that's been very valuable to me is a lot of front runners. There's some of these programs, some of these teams, when a kid loses, then they just throw it in. They don't compete anymore. But we preach coming up the back door. I tell them, I spent my career in the backside of a bracket getting thirds and fifths, and that it takes a lot to do that. So in our practice, in our visualization, like I can tell you, I had a kid named Jackson Royer, grew up with my son. He won a state title as a junior. And I first started saying to him, okay, at practice, Jack, his senior year, you just lost. You just lost. You got a bad call in the semifinals. What are you going to do? How are you going to do? I did it with my son. I do it with Jesse Landtroop now. I did it back, with you lost. I'm sorry. We can't change it, but I need you to put yourself. You just lost. Now you're in the backside of the bracket. You cannot be a state champion, but you can help us get a trophy. You can help us win it. What's your response? What's your response going to be? And I had a kid named Kevin Loomis, who was a state champion in 98. In 99, he gets the most horrific 6 seconds after the match had ended. Scoring happened because a little girl that was a towel tapper missed the towel, and then she got confused, didn't know what to do, and a score happened, and they didn't reverse it. And it was the most horrific thing. Oregon State's coach, one of Oregon State's coaches, Dan Hicks, came up and he says, one of the best wrestlers in this tournament today is going to get third. And I said, yep. And so I've used that as an example. You've got to still respond. And so we put our kids in that place. How are you going to respond? Because I've watched guys just throw it in. Oh, I can't be first. Their front runner mentality. And, if you can't be first, you still got to do something for your team, and you got to, for the program, and for yourself. You can feel bad about the loss later on, and, but you still got to do some great things for your program.
No, I love that. That's a great answer, Coach. Are there any, acronyms or quotes that you kind of use within the program to, get your message or point across?
I say I say things all the time. Probably some things I shouldn't, but I do say how you respond to adversity is a mark on your character. They get to hear that. One thing that has taken off, and some other people have put it on their walls in their wrestling rooms across the state, and different people are putting it on some of their awards. And I say this, and I've said it for several years now, and it's kind of funny because other people are saying it and posting it. Now I say that success is not an accident. It's an on purpose. And, success is not an accident. You don't get good on accident. It's an on purpose. You purposefully set forth to do great things. And nobody, you don't, if you're a big archery hunter into elk, you don't accidentally kill an elk. You put time in, you put work in, you go find where they're at, you do the work. Same in sports. Success is not an accident. It's an on purpose. And, and then I've stole some of the greatest things I know. I've stole drillers make killers from Colby Covington.
I like that one.
Drillers make killers.
And that's across every sport too, just drillers.
Everything.
Well, I guess all the acronyms you're saying or quotes are.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah. So I say a lot of other stuff too. So probably stuff.
Yeah.
You
all right.
Be careful.
The year is let's just say 2046. Coach Thorpe is finally stepping away from wrestling. as the wrestling coach. He's got his last senior banquet. He's up there giving his last speech to the team and to the community. What does that last speech consist of?
Be proud of what you've accomplished, but we're not done yet. That's it.
Let's end it right there. Let's end it right there, man. That was good stuff. Shoot, man. I appreciate you, Coach. Thanks so much for hopping on and making time for me and, working through all the technical difficulties. I appreciate that.
Yep. I do too, man. Thank you very much. I appreciate it. And I was glad I got to do this.